Welcome back. This is going to be a campaign diary of session 14 of my Dungeons & Dragons campaign. So last when we left our adventurers, they had defeated the Gremlin Lord and retrieved the rum that Balubus had sent them on to get. They made their way back to Balubus and they tried to argue with him about changing the deal. And then he's like, no, you guys can I can either take you there now or you guys are on your own. So they decided basically to go with Balubus and wait the next day and take a long rest as they were just done fighting, as well as the sky was going from orange to blue. They decided to take a long rest during the blue portion. So when they woke up, we started the session with them just before going to bed. Thadon takes his brother Tink and they go have a discussion about how they're doing, how things are going. And I really love this, that my cousin who's playing Thadon the Bugbear Rogue took the time to really express how their characters are doing, because ultimately the story is not about what I put in front of them. The story is about their characters and what they do and how they're feeling. So I love how he's taking the time to do that with his character and with his brother and including other people in that. I wish that is what all the characters did. I don't mind sitting back for 20 to 30 minutes while they do that and then moving on with the plot, because the point isn't how fast can we get to the end of the plot and kill the big bad guy. The story is the beginning, middle, and end. So I think that's something I need to really foster and encourage my players to do. So I really enjoyed that. And then we went over to Enzo and Olivax, who wanted to chit chat and talk about these gremlin babies that they had basically kidnapped from these gremlins that they slaughtered, to how are they going to handle them? Should we leave them? What happens if they can't go to the portal with us? What are we going to do? They were very concerned as they're watching Waldo sleep with the gremlin babies laying on his stomach, rising and falling as he breathes. And I love that heart-to-heart moment about oh, would I stay behind, or what would I do? I don't know. Then they decided to go to sleep, and as they slept, they each had dreams, and the dreams were Enzo was met by his patron, giving him a clue hey, you probably need to head home soon. Luna is looking for you. Luna is his girlfriend who works for the Ravens. Then Wink had a dream about seeing a black tower amidst water and mist, and he longs to be there. Thadon had memories of getting beat and thrown and overcharged and protecting his brother, all because he's a bugbear, and the racism that he had encountered basically throughout his entire life. Olivax had a dream of Ivan, his squire, being happy and devoted and taking pride in his work. And Waldo had a dream that he was being hunted and ran down for taking these gremlins and feeling like taking them was the wrong choice and regretting that. And lastly, Tink had a dream that he was going to sell all of these crystals that he took, and he was going to sell them to a tiefling, and he was going to make a bunch of money, and he was super excited. And after Tink had his dream, they all had their dreams. They all awoke, and they were all super pumped to get going. So they went and got Balubus. Wink had a little discussion with Balubus, telling him oh, super excited to work with you. Hopefully we can make this work. Olivax then approached Balubus and apologized as they started heading out, saying, hey, look, I shouldn't have tried to extort you basically to take us to Lysara, and what I said was wrong. And Balubus was like, yep, you were wrong. I accept your apology. And Olivax was taken back, his pride took a little notch there, but he went back. I had no dialogue planned for Balubus. I really had none of this planned out. The only thing I had planned was the next portion, which was after they had walked for 3 hours. A figure with green, a green knight basically with leaf cape, hopped out of the trees and called out Wink and said I challenge you to a duel, release these prisoners from their bondage type of thing, and made demands. And they were like, what? Oh, are you here for the gremlins? And he threw his axe at him and stuck him a little bit and started pulling him to him as if it was tied to an invisible rope. And he was shouting demands, and they're like, look, you can have the gremlins if this is what you came for. What do you want? He's like, wait, are you not with Oberon? And they're like, who's Oberon? And so he told them that Oberon was in these lands and they're killing any goblinoids that they can find. And they learned that he basically told them his life story, hey, I've been here for just over 2 years. And after I had worked at my post under Oberon and became a Green Knight, I guarded this Evertree, and I met this witch in the forest who had a mosque atop dinosaur legs, and she was very friendly, and she gave me my memories back in exchange for my little dog, here's brother, and his dog was like this cute little furry puppy with little horns and little bat wings, and he like when he would fly, his like whole body would droop and basically being held up by his wings flapping. And if he got within 5 feet of you, you had to roll a wisdom save, or you were actually like compelled to pet him, like you thought he was that cute and you were charmed by him. So I enjoyed role playing that and having them roll for that. And this figure who was the size of a halfling, this green knight, showed him his green tinted skin and was like, oh, I was a halfling once, or at least that's what I thought I was. And after I learned who I was, I confronted Oberon and he had branded me a traitor, and he ran off. And his name is Aethel, but prior to him being captured and stolen and taken here, they called him Emanuele, and Emanuele was the grandson of Ida. Have you seen my grandson? That is her grandson is Emanuele, who's been gone for 12 years and has been found by the group. So they were reunited and they're like, oh, you know Ida? And he's like, yes, do you know her? And they told him of her death, to which he was very saddened and depressed, and they comforted him, and he told them that he can have a signal to get some goblins to come get these gremlins, because they should not be seen with them, as if there are servants of Oberon nearby, they will surely kill them. And if they stay here when the goblins come to get the gremlins, they will just brand them as kidnappers and kill them regardless if they have good intentions or not. So after a slight discussion, they decided, okay, we'll leave them here. And Waldo lined them up all in a row, all cute with their rocks, and he said goodbye one-on-one. I'm like envisioning like Gru saying goodbye to his little minions, like his little kids, and it was just like a little heartfelt moment there. One of the saddest of the campaign, I think, other than Ida dying and him just saying goodbye, because Waldo has such a tender care for these things. So after they said goodbye, he did a signal to call for goblins, and they headed on their way. I didn't really have any of that planned as far as like how we would get the gremlins away, because that was not something I was considering, them actually taking the gremlins. At first I thought maybe I could have the rat folk seek them out and say, hey, can you give these back, like this is all we have left? But I think this was a great alternative that I just came up with on the fly. I was debating between the two, and it just felt like it flowed well. And then after, Aethel asked if he could join their cause, as he's also trying to get out of here. So Aethel, or Emanuele, joined them, and Balubas led them through into the swamplands, which were like roots holding up these massive trees, and there were clouds spiraling up into the sky and moving all about. And random, they see like cartoon looking like rain clouds just like moving across the landscape, wetting everything down. And after a while walking through the marshes, they come up, they see like a bunch of mushrooms, and they see this big mushroom, and on top it they see like a big slug, who is the fragrant one. If they chose the swamp initially, they would have ran into him. However, it would have been more in depth, and there would have been combat involved with like saving him. However, I just changed it on the fly because the portal to get out of here was always going to be in the swamps. So he said like, oh, I want to be your friends, will you come and talk with me, and I have like a game to play with you guys. And they were obviously very weary of how they should approach this, and I had them pull up Roll20. I had a map for it just so they could move around and their characters could explore. There was never going to be combat involved with this, and he told them to watch out, like there's water dragons lurking about. And so they decided to play, and he told them riddles, and these were riddles that I made using ChatGPT and myself, kind of modifying them to fit what I wanted. And the riddles, there was 4 riddles. The first 3 were just like a game. If they ever would have failed one of the riddles, he would have had them walk into the swamp, which is very muddy on the side, and there's like a lot of sinkholes where they would have sunk in and gotten all dirty, as he's like very mischievous and he just wants to like mess with people, like get them all wet and all their crap all wet. That's funny to him. So that's all that would have happened. So nothing dangerous, but they were like, stay fearful, don't listen to him. He could like get a deal where we're like stranded or captured, enslaved. So I had fun like kind of maneuvering that. So they got to the 3 riddles, and the 4th riddle was instructions of how to get the bridge to appear, because behind the slug there were 2 bridges. One bridge was shorter and led to like a dead-end island, but the bridge was all constructed, where the bridge they wanted to take, which was straight forward, was all broken. So they had to walk across the bridge and then speedily run back across, and all of the wood from that bridge would be taken and basically fill in the gaps and broken planks of the other bridge so they can then walk across. And so they did that, and he's like, oh, don't go, like I have one more riddle for a treasure if you guys want to stay and do one more. And obviously Wink and Thedon could not resist, so Wink listened initially, and Thedon like stood by to like overhear. And throughout, this was just lore about the world. I did not talk about this character. Queen Titania was the answer to the riddle, and I don't think I ever referenced her, so it's just just basically if the players knew. And I knew that my cousin playing Thadon knows a lot about Dungeons and Dragons, so I knew that he most likely would have known. At first, I thought maybe they could do a roll to see if they remembered, but it wasn't necessary. So after the fragrant one, which is the name of the slug, told Wink the riddle like 3 times, I was like, oh, Thadon, I noticed that you're listening, Bugbear. Would you like to join? And then he joined and gave the answer. So since they gave the answer, the treasure was a deed to a treehouse, which I had no plans as far as like what the treehouse is or is not. I just wrote it down like that'll be funny to give them like a deed to something like land in the Pharaoh. So they were super excited, like, oh, we could totally use this to set up like an outpost to work with Balubas and getting our like mead and ale and rum. So this is perfect. So that worked out great. So they then headed across and they asked like about like where they could find this treehouse, which again I had none of this planned, so I just made everything up on the fly. I'm like, oh, we'll seek this other person out in the swamplands, which was the first person they would have met if they went to the swamps initially, like that plot line. So I'm just recycling that information. So if they ever come back and they want to meet that person, they'll meet the person they would have met as if they would have chosen the swamp quest line, basically. So they cross and Balubas leads them to a pond with lily pads, and it's like very marshy thing, like Lord of the Rings marsh. And in the water they see like all these faces, like eyes and like half rotted off ears and black haired people, and they ask for the key. So Tink pulls out one of the long crystals, probably the size of his forearm, and he gives it to them, and they immediately like all go underwater and they swim to the bottom, and all of these lily pads like come together in a circle, and then it starts swirling and there's a pulse and the water turns clear and all of the lily pads spread apart and the gate is opened. And this gate I just made up on the fly ahead. I knew that it was going to be a pond, and I knew I was going to use these creatures to be the guardians or the gatekeepers that Balubas has charmed and like befriended, but I didn't know like the semantics of how the portals will work, especially because like the portals from the Fey realm to the material plane are very random. Like it can be just a circle, it could be just the way you climb a tree or where you sleep, or if you jump in a certain area, or if you touch things in a certain way. So I just made all those up on the fly as well when they were asking like what other portals are there. But they asked for the crystal back and they're like, nope, it's consumed. This is like a one-way portal basically. It could be a two-way, but it just depends. So Emanuele asks if he can go first, as he's been here. He's been trapped here, kidnapped for so long. He really wants to go home, so he jumps in first and he sinks to the bottom. They can see him perfectly clear to where the pulsating originated from, and then boop, he disappears. And they all one by one go in and they have like their final look around and their last word basically as they all return, and that's where we ended the session. Overall, I thought the session went great. I think it was one of our better sessions as far as like encounter to role-playing ratio. There weren't any battles per se, but I thought that the encounters were just a mix-up of having different types of encounters. I need to come up with better ways to use puzzles instead of just riddles, but hey, I think they're fun and it gets other players involved in using their brains in different ways, so I thought it was good enough. So look out for the future with me using different types of puzzles like math or linear or logic puzzles. I think those would be really fun. But yeah, I really enjoyed the reveal of Emanuele. I enjoyed using the fragrant one and Balubas. It's always hard to talk in Balubas' Irish accent as I suck so bad at doing it, but it's really funny and it's really enjoyable for I think the players to listen to it as well. So we all suffer through it, but I really enjoy the role playing. I love the character to character dialogue and discussing like what's happening, how their characters are feeling, what their plans are, what do they long for, like just checking up on each other, I think has been a very great addition to this session. But yeah, so I'm super excited for the next session as well. Like this session I was super pumped for the Emanuele reveal, but I'm even more excited for the next session when they all go and talk to each other. They have been gone for quite a while. Every time the sky has changed, it has been 5 days. Every total day has been 10 days in this specific region. I just decided the region didn't roll for anything, but this region was 10 days. I did mention through Emanuele that every region has a different time period, and that is true. However, for this specific region, which they were at around Alloy again, when they first entered, I did give them a description of like, oh, the landscape looks similar to what you guys have seen near Alloy, and they've been near Alloy the whole time. Like they went in the mountains, and then they went into the forest a little bit, and then they went into the swamp, so around that same area. So 10 days per one day. They've been in here for 5 days, so they've missed over a month of time in game, and a lot of things have been happening. Ragnar has made declaration and has been cleansing the world of religion. There has been changes with Ivan getting taken away, and the Platinum Sanctuary has finally heeded Olivax's missives or his letters to them. So I'm super pumped for him to read that letter that I drafted. I spent a ton of time on the letter and I think it's perfect. So I'm super excited for him to read that. So stay tuned to watch that session and watch his reaction. Super excited. I think he'll be bummed that Ivan is gone, but I'm also very excited for him to meet his new squire. So stay tuned for that. I'm also super excited for them to meet with Droll. He has tons of news to give to them, as well as some of them have had dreams and they have learned, the players know that their dreams have come true, but the characters do not. So I'm excited to show them how their characters have come true. They're also going to realize like they were heroes for saving the orcs. However, there are other players in town. Maybe a rival guild has come up and kind of taken their place since they have been gone. So I'm super excited for all of these things. Stay tuned for the next one. Get out of here and enjoy